Welcome back to another video with the Afro Hippie Journalist. This is part 2 of why you should vote for Jill Stein. Now, another reason I'm voting for her is her views on drugs. She said the war on drugs is racist. And it really is, because she made another good point in the debate about this, which is that black people who commit the same crimes as a white person receive a much higher, more heinous sentence than a white person would. And she says we need to do something about the injustices of the justice system. And that is a huge issue, because a lot of black men do get more time and more of a sentence than a white person does. For instance, if they were both caught with the same drug, the black man is more likely to spend life in prison. As we have seen, there are a lot of black men in prison. And one thing she said, there's a lot of black men in prison who are serving a lot of time for doing something so little. And that is completely true. You know, it's come to the point where, you know, black people really can't do anything, basically. Anything that they do, they can go to jail or be killed for. She says transform from criminal drug system to public health system. She says she supports the legalization of marijuana. I'm on board with that, even though I don't smoke. I would like to juice cannabis. So, yeah. She said marijuana is dangerous because it's illegal, not vice versa. So, meaning, for some of you who didn't quite catch that, is that she's saying marijuana is dangerous because it's illegal. It's not illegal because it's dangerous. Okay. No one has ever died from smoking marijuana. The thing is, like, if they tax marijuana, like, that's one thing that they're not realizing. If they tax marijuana, they can make so much money off of it. And there's a lot of states who have legalized marijuana. And I see nothing wrong with it. I don't understand why marijuana is such a huge deal when you have drugs on the street like cocaine, heroin, all these different types of pills that people are using and abusing. There's much more to be concerned with than marijuana, which is a plant that is grown from the ground. That's a natural thing. Okay, now back to crime, which I left off in the last video. It says the judicial system makes mistakes and kills innocent people every single day, mainly black people and Hispanics. It says stop dumping resources into the prison industrial complex. Incarcerating poor and minorities has become big business, and it really has. And that's why I think that a lot of black men and Hispanic men receive so much more time than white men, because they get so much money for that. It says the death penalty is ineffective and also barbaric. I agree to some extent, depending on what the crime was, because if you're getting a death penalty for murder, then I can understand that. But if you're getting the death penalty for, rape or something else like that, I'm not saying that they shouldn't receive a severe punishment, but for someone who raped another person, I feel like I don't think they should receive the death penalty, because that's just too easy. To me, that's just too easy. I feel like that person should live and receive maybe life in prison, and that would torture them. They would have to live with that every single day. Look at the cell walls, go outside and be fenced in, and would be reminded every day of why they're there. To me, that would seem like an awesome punishment instead of the death penalty. So that's why I say I agree with that to some extent. And it says mandatory sentencing ineffective, and racially discriminatory. Which I agree, because as these police officers who have been charged with manslaughter for killing these black men, they've been charged, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they would be sentenced. Whereas if it was a black person, they would have mandatory sentencing. That's not fair, and that's not right. Now let's go down and look at some of her other points. Back to education. Is bail out the students instead of bailing out the banks. I agree. Establish basic rights of free college education, which she said in 2012, and she's saying it again in 2016. Students are on the receiving end of generational injustice. That is true, because people of my generation, specifically people who were born between, like, I want to say the mid 80s to the early 90s, like, we're suffering and we're drowning in debt. And even though some of us do have amazing jobs, it's still unlikely for us to get out of this debt. To me, even though I only have $20,000, that seems like, a lifetime of debt, even though it's not. College loans trap students in financial prison of debt. And that's another thing about education, because in school we were not taught about loans and why we should not have them, why we should not get them. We weren't taught about credit. And I feel like that's one thing that should be taught in education is loans, money, everything like that. Right to a tuition-free public education pre-K through college. Focus on student needs, not corporate needs, which corporate needs would be like the number of students who are graduating, which also affects the money that the schools get from the state. Move school decisions from national to grassroots level. Charter schools siphon resources from public schools. Opposes teacher-led prayer in public schools. Vital public system under attack from privatization. Stop blaming teachers for underperforming schools. I agree with that one. Stop blaming teachers for underperforming schools. That has nothing to do with the teachers. Students are also to blame for that. Also, the parents. It's not just the teachers. We can't teach them everything. And this is coming from a teacher. We're only with that child for 8 hours a day, teaching them, academics. Whereas, we should also be incorporating life skills and to such. Standardized tests are misused. They hurt students. Agreed. No economic barriers to quality college education. Agreed. Boost public schools and hold them accountable. Agreed. I agree on all of her standpoints for education, simply because I work in education and I have been through the education system. So, I agree with her standpoints, man. Like, that's a huge, huge deal. A huge, problem that we have in this country is education. Because, like I said before, my generation, us being in debt is actually hurting the economy. It really is hurting the economy. And that's something that she said. If you haven't watched the debate, the expanded debate on Democracy Now!, I will link the video in the description of all the parts of these videos. Because I feel like y'all need to listen to what she's saying and understand that there's a lot of things that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are not speaking on. They're too worried about, her emails, worried about the money that he has offshore. And I'm actually going to talk about that in another video about Donald Trump's views and Hillary Clinton's views. But please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And until next time.